Through you, Mr. Mayor, the recording has begun, and I understand the live streaming is working. You can call your meeting to order.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. I see that we have quorum, so I call this meeting in session. Regular council meeting on Monday, June 21st at 2021 at 5:30 p.m. Before we continue on with council business, have an item I would like to read. Before we begin, I would like to say a few words about former councillor Gary Accursi, who passed away last week. Gary was a committed man to his family and to his community. He chaired his church board, chaired Big Brothers of Welland County, served as a board member with Pelham Minor Baseball, coached hockey and lacrosse, and as one of the Pelham Business Association's founding members. I had the pleasure of sitting beside Gary for 3 years when we were both counselors. We shared our day-to-day living experiences, and his favorite stories involved his grandchildren coming out to help the grandpa on his farm. I was deeply saddened to hear of Gary's passing, and I extend my heartfelt condolences to the Accursi family. I would now like to ask council to observe a moment of silence in Gary's honor. Thank you. Gary, may you rest in peace. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the agenda for the June 21st, 2021 regular meeting of council be adopted. I have, however, been notified by Councillor Hildebrandt that he wishes to bring forth an amendment to the agenda, and that would be that the agenda be amended to include an item under number 10.1, reports from members of council regarding the Utility Sustainability Advisory Committee and MCC Hydro 1 consumption, and that the agenda be amended to have this item 10.1.1, Councillor Hildebrandt's report, to be heard after an item 5 on the agenda, adoption of minutes. I would be looking to the floor for a seconder.
And I see Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unless there's discussion from Councillor Hildebrandt.
No, thank you.
Thank you. I will call the vote starting with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Kaur, that the agenda for the June 21st, 2021 regular meeting of council be adopted as amended. Again, I would start that vote with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that does carry, and that does bring you to the disclosure of pecuniary interests.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. After viewing the agenda, is there any councillor who has a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof to declare? I see Councillor Stewart with her hand up.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's regarding item 10.2.3, the mandatory face coverings. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was making, donating, and selling masks. So I think that exempts me from discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that disclosure. Any other counselor? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have noted so. That does bring you to presentations on the agenda, and our first presenter is Fire Chief Limburner. If he'd like to go ahead and make his verbal presentation.
Fire Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Mayor, Council, and members of the senior leadership team, just a few updates here for you. So as of today, Pelham has had a total case count of 595. We currently have 4 active cases in the town. We're the second lowest municipality in the region. The Niagara region has a total case count of 16,138. Of those, 239 are active, 15,488 are resolved, and we are at 411 deaths. The province, we're at 542,468 total cases. Of those, 529,992 are resolved, and we have 9,022 fatalities. Our hospital admissions continue to wane down. We have total case, our admissions, 361 of those 323 are in ICU, and of those 202 are on ventilators. Across the country, total case count 1,408,565. Of those, 1,371,486 have been resolved, and we have 26,079 fatalities. Niagara region's case doubling time is up to 941 days. Positivity rate is at 2.6%. Our reproduction rate is at 0.8. The variants of concern, the B117, which is the UK variant, we have 4,222 detected. The B1351 South African, there's 2. The B1617 India we have 4, and the P1 Brazil, we have 10 in the region. Infection spread, close contact with confirmed case is 66%, community spread 26.6, unknown spread is 5.2, and travel is 2.2. Our Niagara Public Health is currently working with 8 active outbreaks. They've resolved 416. As far as vaccinations being administered, Niagara is at 391,351, which represents 64.8%. And for a second dose, we're at 16.9%. Across the province, we're at 12,669,776. And countrywide, 32,289,857. Our provincial indicators, our reproduction rate is in green. New cases per 100,000 population is orange. New case daily average is green. New case unknown spread is orange. Our hospital admission, daily admissions is in red, and our positivity rate remains in red. Niagara region has secured a large addition to their vaccine inventory, and they announced today they will be adding more appointments for persons to book vaccinations, which is very promising. As of this morning, all adults who received their first dose on or before May 9th now can book their second shot. We're probably a month to 6 weeks ahead of schedule on some of these vaccines. Federal government also announced that they've extended our border closings until July 21st. And the last item is Pelham's EOC meetings. We have reduced our meetings that were twice a week. We've reduced them now to once a week, which will be on Mondays. And that would mean this report will be filed once per week after our meetings. And that's the end of my report. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chief, for that report. Gratifying to see the COVID is going down and the vaccines are going up. So better days down the road for sure. Any counselor have any questions or comments on the Chief's report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from B. Limburner, Fire Chief and Community Emergency Management Coordinator for information. For the vote, I'll begin with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. Your next presentation is from the CAO, Mr. David Cribbs.
Okay, Mr. CAO, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. Plenty of positive items for you today. First and foremost, I'm 2 weeks shy of 18 years in municipal service, and I've never come to a council meeting in a T-shirt. Of course, I've never been asked to model Pelham's new Canada Day shirts, and I think I offer the largest canvas of anyone on staff, so it may well be a meritorious modeling. But you'll note North Pelham, Fenwick, Fonthill, Ridgeville, Effingham, all making an appearance. So these are part of a package of Canada Day items we have arranged for the big day. Of course, we're going to start with the parade in the morning at Centennial Park. For those who enjoyed the Santa parade back in December, it's the same route. And again, it's reverse. Participation is free, but you do have to sign up to be able to participate so that we can schedule times and numbers. And the public can do so by going to our website or calling the MCC as they prefer. Ultimately, the website will direct them onwards. We are doing a pretty great hybrid sort of online and real world scavenger hunt that involves the chase the moose. So this is the moose. Everyone has to name their own. This is Melvin Moose in the Cribbs household. Got to say, I think he's got the early lead. And so lots of good things coming towards Canada Day. Stepping back from Canada Day, we've released times for 4 new summer camps. All of our current camps are sold out and have waiting lists. But the 4 new ones released today are Bike Camp, Animal Adventure Camp, Art and Theater Camp, and Leadership Camp. So we do have space in those for the public. In addition, the pool is open. As with last year, people have to make reservations, either for lane or for family swims. However, it's functioning fundamentally the way it did last year. In that it's open, but you do have to book ahead of time. Soccer and baseball diamonds are open for drills with restrictions, and Aquafit will start in the pool on July 5th. With respect to actual COVID numbers, I reported earlier that the 7 days we ran clinics at the MCC back in May, we had 17,749 come through the door. More recently, June 9 to 15th, we had 19,711 come through the door. So it's essentially double our population between those two. And the next clinics upcoming are June 28th to July 10th inclusive. So in fact, we'll be operating clinics on Canada Day at the MCC. I understand that we either have overtaken or are about to overtake the McBain Center for the most clinic visits in Niagara. So that thing you either see or are about to see in the rearview mirror is in fact the McBain Center. Good on MCC and Pelham. There is nothing like coming in first place. The Pelham Mouse roars. Anyway, lots of exciting things coming for Canada Day in a COVID-friendly, safe manner. I welcome the public to go to Pelham, type in Pelham and Canada Day celebrations, or go directly to our website as you prefer. And read the good numbers on the vaccination front. And with that, and subject to questions, I'm going to sit here in my Canada Day T-shirt. Thank you.
Thank you for your report, Mr. CAO. You are indeed a great billboard for the town of Pelham. Any questions or comments on the report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from D. Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer, for information. I start the vote with Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin,
Yes.
and that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to our next presentation. We have the town's climate change coordinator here to present to council. We'll just be letting her into the meeting. Oh, I do see that she is here. Yes. Ms. Maney, if you'd like, you can turn on your camera and start your presentation.
Sure.
Okay, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present the plan, which has been in making for the past 2 years. So I'll quickly share my screen and go on and present the slides that I've prepared. This plan has been an effort that's been ongoing for the past 2 years, and various sections of our community have been involved with it. So how it goes is there are 10 sections in the report itself, which I've briefly presented in this presentation that I will be going over. So over the past few years, we've seen increased and more frequent severe weather events, extreme weather events. One of the most recent examples, I should say, would be the damage to the Pelham marshes that was caused by a storm in February of 2019. Temperature changes have been observed, which have led to invasive species infestations like the gypsy moths we've been dealing with and increased heat waves. Heavy precipitation over the years has led to flooding multiple times. Moreover, there's been increased incident reports of ice storms, excessive heat alert warnings, and freezing rains. So in order to increase our resilience and adapt to the threats of climate change, we sanctioned development of a corporate climate change adaptation plan in June 2019. So this project was done in partnership with Niagara Adapts at Brock University, and it was a 2-year-long project, which we have finished now. So what is climate change? Essentially, it's the changes that we observe in certain variables like temperature and rainfall over a long period of time over a particular region. So in our case, when we consider the Earth, so the WMO released a statement that indicated 2020 was one of the warmest years on record. Our global mean surface temperature is 1.2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels already. And then more frequent and extreme weather events, such as heavy rainfall and floods, droughts, fires, cold, heat waves, and severe storms have been observed across the world. So what does this mean for Canada? Canada has been warming at double the global rate simply because of melting of the snow, which is quicker, and since we fall in that zone. And the annual seasonal mean temperatures have increased with more warming in winters. To talk of a particular number, which is 1.7 degrees Celsius increase in the mean annual temperature for Canada. Mean precipitation has also increased over the years, and storms, heat waves, droughts, floods, again, would be intensified due to warmer temperatures. So these effects, as much as they take place over globally over a particular region, but they're felt by the people who live in those communities at a municipal and a local regional scale. So what did our planning process actually look like? So we had a 5-stage planning process, which essentially would help us build more resilience to these climate change impacts. So this project was undertaken in partnership with Niagara Adapts at Brock University, and this was supported by FCM. Again, so our 5-stage process involved initiating and developing an evidence base, and then building an adaptation plan, which is where we are. We finished the step 3, and then we have implementing actions and monitoring progress, which I'll be talking about a little later. Community engagement was another part of this project, which was very important, and I'll again talk about it in a next slide. So what are climate change projections and impacts in Pelham? So we mapped 3 variables essentially, which were temperature, precipitation, and extreme weather events. Now we understand with the research that temperature is rising, precipitation is rising, and extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and stronger, which is essentially in sync with what we are seeing globally. Now, all these variables impact these functions of society: natural resources, our economy, our public health and safety, administration, and community services. So what we did was we mapped each variable against each of these functions, and then we ended up with 53 climate impact statements. So an example of impact statement would be increase in temperature causes more invasive species, and those invasive species end up harming our natural resources. Another example would be precipitation increases causes flooding, which damages infrastructure and impacts local economy. So these are the kinds of 53 impact statements that we developed. Now, essentially, the degree of impact of each of these climate statements is not the same. We are affected by some of them strongly, and some of them moderately, and some of them very lightly. So to understand and uncover this degree, we conducted a vulnerability and risk assessment. So essentially, all the 53 impact statements were assessed through a very intense vulnerability assessment. And vulnerability, which is defined, which is sort of a function of exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity, led us to an analysis and then finally resulted in developing 30 statements, impact statements, which were medium and high in vulnerability. So we were more susceptible to those climate impacts. So then those 30 statements were sort of assessed for risk, just to understand that the likelihood and the consequence of those impacts on us. So out of those, we found on a spectrum from medium to high that we had 16 priority impacts. Now, this exercise was essentially more important because those priority impacts need to be addressed urgently and sooner, and sort of with more intensity and more efforts compared to the others. Community engagement. So this is one of an essential part of building a climate change adaptation plan, and we did it in 2 steps at 2 stages. One was vulnerability assessment, which was done at the time of assessing different indicators for vulnerability, and our municipal partners ranked from most to least important based on this priority scale. Then secondly, there were 2 survey instruments that were implemented at municipal and household scale to understand and gain an in-depth knowledge of vulnerabilities that we are facing in the community. Second was a simple survey that we had sent out to the wider community to understand what their feedback was on draft vision and goals that we essentially finalized. So our vision is to reduce, respond to, and recover from these threats of climate change, which also piles on to the fact that we do have some opportunities that are created, and then we do want to embrace those as well. So overall, holistic delivering this sustainable development, which promotes our cultural assets while protecting our environmental assets. So culminating all of these previous steps, we finally are left with 8 goals and 45 actions. So these are 8 goals that we are going to be considering as a roadmap when we implement the plan. And then each goal has a particular set of actions that is aligned with it specifically. So the first goal talks about protecting community members and workers from health risks. Second is about building awareness. Third is about managing extreme weather events and emergencies. Goal 4 talks about having more adaptive capacity in our infrastructure. Goal 5 is essentially about protecting our urban and rural forests. Goal 6 is to cultivate resiliency to flooding events. Goal 7 is about streamlining our services. And goal 8, which is the final goal, talks about mainstreaming the climate change information. So all these goals, the idea behind these goals is to make sure that we are covering all the bases and we're covering all the sections of the society, our priority impacts, and having the actions aligned with what the research that we had done previously. Now, this is what is supposed to be done. So in order to understand what what it's supposed to be done and then translating it to how it's supposed to be done. So we have an implementation schedule in place, which is a part of the plan. So the implementation schedule essentially talks about the options, which are the 45 adaptation actions. Then we have the description and scope, what it would entail. We do have the lead departments, the relevant departments, the implementation term, when it should be implemented, and then essentially in the end are resources which would be required, so in terms of staff and budget. So this is what the future looks like for a plan. So sort of this plan forms the blueprint. The implementation schedule basically forms the blueprint for the next steps. The final part of the plan is the monitoring and review strategy. So we did end up including this part because we can sort of implement all the actions, but unless we monitor the progress while we are doing that and after we have done that, it sort of doesn't make much sense to keep going even if something is not working. So in that sense, it's a working document. It's a living document, the implementation plan. We can definitely look at how it's going and then change the implementation plan and work according to our needs down the line. This is the last step in the plan, and it just generally has indicators, the lead departments who should measure them, the duration, and again, the resource requirements which we would need. Essentially, this is a very brief overview of what is included in the plan and the steps that we've taken with Niagara Adapts to follow what ICLEI guides and to follow what they developed. So most work was done by Deanna, then I came on board and finished the plan. So essentially, this is a done document. So thank you so much for listening to the presentation. And if you have any questions, concerns, I'll be happy to address those.
Thank you very much. And wow, what a lot of facts and figures in the presentation. Thank you. Council, any questions, comments on this climate change
If you could
paper?
I apologize, Mr. Mayor, through you. If you could just unshare your screen, then we would be able to see the rest of the members of council.
Definitely.
Thank you so very much.
There we go. Any comments or questions? I see Councillor Olson. You're on mute, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, if it pleases yourself and council, I'd like to mention that today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And I just mentioned that because of many of the sad events we've heard about in most recently in Kamloops. But Ms. Maney, I appreciate that presentation very much because I think that zero emissions is going to be the primary topic for the next century. And I think you and your team have done a terrific job in getting this together like this. I read through the entire plan and saw how many people in a cross-functional way have contributed to this. And it's certainly appreciated to see that so many individuals and residents have participated in this production of this plan. And I think it's probably one of the most detailed plans I've ever seen as far as presentation for work plan and implementation. And hopefully this is not one of those things that sits on the shelf, and I don't believe it will be. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? I see Councillor Hahn. You are on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're on.
Through the mayor. Thank you for your presentation. Just wondering, have you collaborated with the CEMC, our fire chief, to understand which hazards were already identified in our town HIRA, and then subsequently which of those were addressed in our emergency management plans?
So exactly. So this is exactly what the implementation stage of the plan talks about. So now that we are here and we've finished our plan, but this is a great point. We definitely need to look into this. What overlaps are there, what already exists, and what we can do. So essentially, yes, this would be one of our next steps.
Yeah, because this is very much, you understand, this is very much about emergency management, right?
Mm-hmm.
The tie to emergency management. Right. And the town will at some point in time this year be having a review of the emergency management plan. So there should be a tie-in to this.
Definitely. This is a great point. Actually, we do need to overlap all our policies and plans so that nothing stays separate and it is an integrated part of the community and how we go forward. So yes, it's a great point, and I'll make a note of it. I'll reach out to concerned people and then make sure that happens.
Thank you. And this next question would be to the fire chief. I think he's still on. And that would be, now that you've been able to see this plan, I'm guessing that you've noticed some overlap in regards to things like heat events, cold weather events, et cetera, and some of the emergency management plans we probably already have or should have in place. You've seen some overlap there?
Fire chief?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there's a fair bit of overlap. We do have a number of things in place now, and I'm sure through the this process and the review process that we're going to be going forward with after things settle down, we do have an emergency plan in place, and within that we have the HIRA, which is the hazard identification risk assessment. We have a 72-hour emergency guide. We also have an emergency plan in place that has to be filled out, developed and filled out by all user groups and approved prior to having any event in the town. And the main one is to speak to severe weather events. And here in Pelham, our number one is wind. That's where we run into the biggest problems. And we do get some pretty big rainstorms, but wind is probably one of the top ones on the HIRA. And then we do the EOC. We have the emergency control group, and we get together on a regular basis. We do annual exercises and practice. So all this, I think this is really good information, and there's a good opportunity for us to blend in here, work together, and improve all these processes through this. So thanks for your presentation. It was very good.
Thank you. And exactly what she said, there is an opportunity and we should definitely take advantage of it as a team. And I will make sure that I follow up on the points you just mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the presenter? Okay. Not seeing any. Again, thank you for that very thorough report. We look forward to seeing it implemented gradually into the town's work method. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that Council receive the Town of Pelham's Climate Change Coordination Presentation regarding the Town of Pelham's Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan for information. For the vote, I'd start with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that carries. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to our next item on the agenda, which is the adoption of minutes. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and in red. 1. Special Council 09/2021, Special Council Minutes June 7th, 2021, and C10/2021, Council Minutes June 7th, 2021. Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to call for any errors or omissions.
Okay, thank you. After viewing these minutes, is there any councillor that has spotted any errors or omissions in these documents? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start this vote with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. Mr. Mayor, as you do recall, the agenda was amended and the order was changed. And we do have a report from a member of council, which is Councillor Hildebrand, and he has a presentation he would like to make to council. So Councillor Hildebrand, if you wish, you may proceed.
Thank you, Council, for this opportunity. And I just want to update the council and senior leadership staff and also the general public as to where the USC, they have been doing and where we're at, and just to review the past a little bit. And some of the things we're going to be talking about will be addressed in one of the agenda items coming up. So the screen could be shared for the power usage at the MCC. Weekly, Ontario Hydro Energy produces a report detailing our energy consumption every 15 minutes for the MCC. This is forward. That's not the right one. Did Mike send you another one? That one, that's it. So I don't know whether it's easy for us to see. Our graph for this year is the yellow line that's going up and down. As soon as the vaccination clinic started at the MCC, USC immediately introduced notice power usage more than doubling. That was caused by the running of the HVAC system 24 hours a day during any clinic day. So basically, we're running from an average of 200 kVA up to 450 kVA during that time. So we just wanted to introduce that because we are keeping track of our power usage. We expected our power usage, if we were normally, to be below last year's numbers. So we are making headway with power consumption at the MCC. So I think great work by the staff and everyone who weekly monitors these reports and the work that's done with it. The next report I have has to do with the MCC with regards to where we are reviewing the deficiencies and work that still has to be done that we're still working on as a committee. I just want to remind everyone that the MCC only had one preliminary commissioning report done. The final commissioning report is still an outstanding item that we're trying to work through the details with fall construction. Way back when, I think the mayor will remember that him and I and staff were willing to go even up to ball construction to try and get some of these items resolved. So if the electrical system design drawing that got prepared for this would come up, that'd be great. The electrical system was never designed by an engineer. And that's why we have a transformer that is more than double the size and inefficient. When staff in USC had electrical output of the transformer monitored, because this was never done at the operational stage, we found that the transformer output is high. Taps need to be adjusted. That's still one of our outstanding items that the USC has on their list that tend to get done with the staff. Part of the USC investigation and also involved the electrical contractor who helped us open up the box. The left-hand side of this drawing that I've got circled shows the generator, and it shows an electrical connection box. When we opened up that electrical connection box, we found that all we had is a bunch of loose wires. The other thing that drawing illustrates is that when we pull the switch for the generator, all we do is produce power going down the drawing on the left-hand side. And after meetings with ECHO, who were the designers of this system, and their chief electrician, that system only powers the lights in the gyms and the kitchen. So remember, we got an emergency management plan that is planning on using this facility as an emergency thing. So all the things like the washrooms, like the toilets, like the water that have all these automatic functions in the doors, this generator does not address any of that operation. So that's one thing that we still have high on our list. The unfortunate thing about all this is the electrical distribution system at the MCC was never designed to power anything else but the lights. That's all we've determined at this point. So it's a major cost and major engineering pass to redesign the system if we plan on using this building for anything else than we're presently using it as. So that basically covers the report. Other than the final part is the part where at the last meeting, the USC highly endorsed the LED streetlight conversion program, which is budgeted to start in 2022. We know that that's a great investment. We've seen the results from Lincoln, Welland, and St. Catharines, and they've all met their targets and have phenomenal savings. Basically, you get your money back in 5 to 6 years. That's basically what they're seeing. So there's big savings to be had by the town by the implementation of LED streetlight conversion. So thank you. So if there's any other questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay, thank you for that thorough report, Councillor Hildebrand. The committee has definitely done yeoman's service for the town and brought the operating expense of the MCC down considerably. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Olson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hildebrand, and thank you for the report. You're getting some great results there. Who is on the hook for the cost of repairing these things and making these alterations? Are we past the warranty period, or are we going to be looking at a bill coming up?
Well,
do you think?
I can't answer for the town specifically. What I can tell you is that there was an outstanding amount still, and I think there still is some outstanding dollars to be paid to Ball. I think at this point, I think it's in our court. That's what I think. But possibly the CA only have a better answer than I do.
Mr. CAO?
Well, Parsha, I'll answer a portion, but then I'd like to defer to Mr. Marr, who has more skill, knowledge, and more familiarity than do I. When I started my employment here, we had a certain amount of money in holdback. So that's when you do a big construction project, you pay the most of the money, but you keep some back to have a way to leverage whoever built it to finish or fix whatever small things are wrong, because there's always going to be little things wrong. We did have constructors in, they did do a bunch of work. We did release some of the holdback. I'm not sure if there's any left. And on that point, I'll hand the ball over to Mr. Marr, if I may. That's what I have for you.
Director of Public Works, Mr. Marr?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. That's basically the CAO answered correctly. There was a portion of money that was held back to repair deficiencies. Most of them were aesthetic and functional type deficiencies. There was no money held back for reconfiguring electrical work within the building to repower the building with a generator. So that wasn't part of the money that was held back. Those deficiencies, the majority of those deficiencies, I believe all of them now have been satisfied. I don't have the exact number, but I know that we released most of the holdback monies that were owing to the contractor upon the successful completion of those deficiencies.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Olson?
Then through you, Mr. Mayor, then from that, it sounds to me like any repairs or anything outside of normal commercial warranties and et cetera, we're on the hook for, I would guess.
Councillor Hildebrand?
But perhaps to the CAO.
Your Worship, we're not going to want to give an exact specific answer in open session, just understanding that there's a fundamental difference between you're supposed to build A and you built A minus, close, and that's a deficiency, versus we don't like the design after the fact, or we should have planned this differently. As long as you built the thing that you were told to build, that's not a deficiency. I make that distinction for council. And we now have the benefit of hindsight in a couple of years operation for a number of things. That being said, there's either a small amount of holdback or it's all paid back. We'll follow up with council and give you the correct answer. I'm sorry, I didn't realize we were going to go here this evening or we'd have had those numbers ready for you. So we will give you a specific answer tomorrow, I would think. There's a distinction between they didn't build it to design specs versus now we think this would have been better some other way.
Councilor Olson, any more?
No, I'm happy to wait for the numbers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Councilor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask Councillor Hildebrandt a question. I want to make sure that I understood what he said. There is a generator, but it only generates enough power for some lights, but it doesn't provide any heating for a winter storm event or any cooling for a summer heat event. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. There is no generator. So when you read the report from the climate people, we're going to be addressing that in 8.3.2. There's a paragraph in the climate adaptation plan that talks about the generator. The generator is to be purchased, but even if we purchase the generator, the design at present only lights up the lights in the gym and the kitchen. That's the way it's wired.
Thank you.
That's the design we have, and probably was the approved design at the time.
Okay, thank you. And a question for Director Marr, please. Is there any way for your department to review the initial plans and drawings to, to see if something like a generating system was missed in the design? Essentially, it should have been there. Thank you.
Director of Public Works, Mr. Marr.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to start the answer by saying that there's not one staff member that's on this call that was involved with the design and the construction of that building. So absolutely, it's a possibility to review the documents. It'll be a very intensive process. And short of resources, yes, that'll be very difficult to undertake, although not impossible.
Can I answer the question for you, Director Marr?
Go ahead, Councillor.
We, as a USC committee, we have reviewed all the background information, and there are no drawings by anyone that would indicate what the electrical design should have been. We hired Ball basically as a design build contractor to some extent, if you want to call it that. It wasn't clearly that, but it was close to that. Ball Construction hired Echo Electric as their electrical contractor and assigned them the responsibility for designing the electrical system. And the electrical system we have was designed by them, and probably they did the best they could based on the information they had with the electrical design. There are no drawings that we could ever find. And the drawing that I just showed you is the as-built drawing for the electrical design for the MCC. That is it. There are no other drawings. So I think we should save staff the time of trying to investigate previous designs because there are none.
Thank you, Councillor. I see Councillor Wink. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, Councillor Wink. I'm sorry, Councillor Stewart, any more questions? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Wink.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hildebrandt, thanks for bringing this to our attention, and thank you and your committee for all the work that you're doing with respect to this. Now, you had mentioned that the cost to provide a generator or fix this problem that we've got would be considerable. And you don't have an estimate, but are we talking tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars?
It comes down to this fact. It depends exactly what you want to do. So if we want to fix all, I guess it comes down to do we want to supply power to the rinks and the lights in the rinks, or just provide power for the generator to the gyms and the washrooms connected with using the MCC as the emergency location in case of severe weather events? So it makes a big difference. And first of all, it would take an engineering study by an electrical engineer, and also an investigation, because we really don't have detailed drawings that show the size of the cabling and what's really done. We only discovered that we had loose wires in the box by having a qualified contractor come in just as a favor to make sure at least we put connectors on there, because at least we wanted some lights on in the place if we had a generator coming in. So I know that doesn't answer your question, but if you fix the whole thing, had the generator power the rinks and all the other stuff, then we're talking the $100,000 plus solution. If you're talking something less, then we're talking something less.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Kaur?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Hildebrand. Would you, type of generator, would it be a natural gas or would it be diesel?
That is a good question. I don't have the answer to that question, but we did investigate the fact of where could we get a generator big enough originally, because we thought we were firing the ice rinks. Because where we originally ran into this, we have the big tournament at Christmas, and that we got thousands of people in there, and we got 2 ice rinks running, and we were concerned that the winter generally is when we have the ice storms and that, and we lose power through Ontario Hydro. And what happens if we lose power? That's when we started, as a committee, taking a look at what was in the system and how the system ran. And that's where we ran into the surprise. So that doesn't answer your question, but I don't know the answer to what would be the best generator. It'd just be the one we could get.
Okay, before you continue, Mr. Kaur, I see the CAO has something to say.
Your Worship, can we let Councillor Kaur ask his question? I do have something to say, but I don't want to preempt Councillor Kaur.
Okay, Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, sir. To Councillor Hildebrand, is there a rough in gas line? Originally, you said that we're going to put in a generator, so they must have had some source of running that generator. So there must be a gas line, or do we have to go put a gas line also?
From what I know, we have to put in a gas line also.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Mr. CAO?
If I can possibly be of some assistance here, we're sort of getting fairly far off where the public agenda is, so I'm trying to keep us with a little bit of municipal act compliance. Also, I think this is certainly something, Councillor Hildebrand's obviously well informed, Mr. Marr is well informed, there's some other people beyond the 2 of them, of course. Council might consider asking for a return report, possibly by Councillor Hildebrand or by Director Marr, as you prefer, presumably both involved, maybe towards the end of the year, at the risk of giving them a date. That's obviously for you to decide, but we have committed to you to getting our the first generation of our asset management program live by Canada Day, as quite a significant gift to the town, I like to think. And we are on track for that to go live. That being said, I can tell you that the first generation of it will have oodles of data, oodle not being a defined term, but it's the result of years of work. But the MCC will not be in there, which is obviously it's a future action item. You can't overlook your major asset and consider it done. So that's an important piece, and we could. This is a worthwhile council discussion topic, but one, it should be on a public agenda, and 2, if council gives some sort of direction, then both Director Marr and Councillor Hildebrand and the advisory committee have something to work with and chew on. So I think that's a helpful thing to do now, and then maybe we could stop. This has been a good discussion, but it's not really on the specifics we're doing right now are not really on the agenda.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. CAO. Councilor Hahn, you did have your hand up. Any comments?
Yes, thank you through the mayor. I would ask, I guess, any report that does come back from whomever also touch base with our fire chief, because I'm sure he would have some input from a emergency management perspective with regards to, I guess, the thinking at some point in time was that this building, the MCC, would be used in that regard. So if that's the case, you think of like a cold weather event or what have you. I have to hope that there was at some point in time some discussion as to, you know, what appliances, what outlets would have to still be powered in that case, or you know, cold weather event or heat wave or whatever it's going to be used for. That there had to be some planning and some discussion. So perhaps he may have some input there if he was privy to those discussions. I don't know. I think he's on a call here, but if there's going to be a report, perhaps they can at least be a reach out in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howland. So what do you say we will follow the CAO's advice? Madam Clerk, can you possibly draw up a motion and we'll
Through you,
have
Mr. Yes.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. The motion, what I'm hearing is we would still want to receive Councillor Hildebrandt's report for information. So it might be it resolved that Council receive the Utility Sustainability Committee verbal update and documentation presentation by Councillor Hildebrandt for information, and that Council direct staff to prepare a report in consultation with Councillor Hildebrandt and the Utility Sustainability Advisory Committee and the Fire Chief with respect to a generator at the MCC, and that the report be brought back to Council by, and I would just be looking for a date for Council.
Okay. Any discussion on this motion? Councillor Olson. You're muted, sir.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd be pleased to make that motion, and I would like to set the date at some time that we could meet the budget schedule of November the 8th, Monday, November the 8th for review.
Okay. Do we have a seconder on this? Actually, Councilor Hildebrand will second it, or you also want to speak?
I'd like to add something to the motion. I think that Director Marr's name should be on there, as well as the fire chief and myself for the USC committee.
Well, they did said town staff, I believe, so that would include.
Town staff. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, debate on this motion? Not seeing it. Shall we have the vote, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I have put the November 8th date in here as requested, and that motion is put forward by Councillor Olson and was seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. And for the vote, I'd begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to item 7 on the agenda. And this is where councillors may choose to lift an item from the consent agenda if they wish to amend the resolution as presented. If councillors simply have comments on an item, they do not require to lift it. If members of council would like to advise if they have any items they wish to lift.
Okay. Any councillor? I see Councillor Hildebrand. You obviously like to lift an item or two.
Yes, an item there too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, item 8.3.2 and item 8.5.6.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other items to be lifted? Okay. Before we do that, does council have any items that they would like to just comment on before we call the vote? I see we have a few. Go ahead, Councillor Wink.
So I'll start with the very first one. Just a quick question to Mr. Marr. After writing the report, there's been about a week or so gone by on 8.3.1. Have permits been issued as of yet? Can you comment on that, please?
Director of Public Works.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the short answer is no. The contractor has not received the permits to date. But if I can expand on that, we've had a number of meetings with the contractor. They have been meeting with the NPCA, and their environmental consultant has been involved in dealing with the NPCA. This morning, we received a work schedule from the contractor. They can't nail down a specific date. Remind council that due to the in-water working restrictions, the timeline for contractors to do the work in the water is between July 1st and August 30th. So they are anticipating to mobilize to the site at the start of July to start some of the work that would be not in water. And they're anticipating that they will receive permits to allow them to start the in-water works in mid-July and continue through and complete both sites by the end of August.
Thank you.
Again, that hinges on the fact that they do get the permits in place that are required to do the work through the NPCA.
Councilor
Okay,
Wynn?
thank you.
Oh, okay.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Hildebrand, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that was one of the answers I was looking for as well. Can the contractor start work on the out of water issues before he needs to go into the water? I rode through there on Saturday and couldn't believe my eyes as to you can hardly ride your bike through that area anymore. That's how serious the erosion has become. And all these flash storms we've had, even in the last week or two, have caused more major damage. So the question I have to you as the director, when does the situation reach the stage where the director can call an emergency situation and get this problem addressed? I mean, are we going to wait here till everything is totally destroyed and then start working on it?
Director of Public Works?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a good question. Initially, when the road collapsed back in 2016, that was most likely an option to move ahead as an emergency repair. With the road being closed off since 2016, there has been access maintained from the north, so from the other side of Sulphur Springs Road. And what really would constitute an emergency now is that if that section of road begins to fail at site 2, there's 2 sites with this project. If the more northern site starts to fail and we started to experience severe erosion and loss of road, then that would constitute an emergency to get in and get it done, so that we don't leave people without access to their properties and for emergency vehicles to get to their properties. So we're proceeding through the design build process. The contractor is working diligently with the environmental approval agencies, and we've had a number of meetings with them, and cooperation is in play. Going through the proper environmental studies that need to be done to do the work, and obviously it's adjacent to the 12 Mile Creek, which is a very sensitive body of water, and controlled through the NPCA, DFO, the Niagara Escarpment Commission. So we feel that we're handling the process now properly, and that we'll deliver a good quality project by the end of this year.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions on any of the consent agenda items? Councilor Wink.
Just a comment on 8.3.3, the 2020 Town of Pelham Annual Report. Just want to give a big shout out to corporate services staff and all the other staff that had input in producing the annual report. It's an impressive document and is something that we can all be proud of.
Yes, and indeed, you're right there, Councillor. A second annual report. The first one got raves, and I believe this one is set to get even better comments. Perhaps a little more thorough, including all the departments in the report. Councillor Hildebrand, I saw your hand.
Through you, yes, I'd like to make a comment on item 8.5.7. That's has to do with Trout Unlimited's report by Brian Green to council.
Yes.
As you realized, Mr. Green presented evidence, and I asked him to confirm the evidence he was provided by data. I followed that up on Councillor Olson's recommendation to follow up on this because data should be available by organizations. So I followed that up with an email to Trout Unlimited to confirm the data and provide reports. I followed it up with an email to NPCA because I was told data was available at NPCA to confirm his data that he provided. Trout Unlimited has not responded. The NPCA has responded, and they state that we did not observe any temperature greater than the lethal limit for brook trout during these 2 years of data collection. They collected data for 2 years, and there was no lethal limit caused by the cannery pond. So contrary to Mr. Green's statements, which they have not defended, the NPCA is also aligning themselves with Dr. Brandt's report. Thank you.
Thank you. It is. It must be also pointed out, Councillor, that the engineering firm doing the Lathrop property, the reason they're taking those ponds out is because of the heat caused by those ponds down water. So I would seem to follow that if there's heat coming from the ponds on the Lathrop property, that there surely must be some kind of warming effect from the cannery pond. But it was great of you to look for the information.
Oh, absolutely. They're not saying that there isn't heat coming from the pond. All they're saying is the heat doesn't reach the lethal limit for brook trout. That's really the summary I think that we're all being told.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, obviously when you get a pond, you're going to heat up. I think everybody understands that.
Yes.
But the question is, Mr. Green stated that the pond temperature was above the lethal limit for brook trout.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on consent agendas? I just have, if not any, I have one I would like to bring up, and I think this is to the Director of Public Works. I believe you're on the committee. Let me find it. Oh, I just went through the minutes of the Pelham Active Transportation Committee, and I see on 6.1 they had they were talking about there should be booklets or pamphlets about trails in Pelham, and I believe that needs a little clarification because Pelham does have bicycle paths pamphlet, and they also have one for trails. So I take it, and they're actually pretty good little maps. I wish we could get them out into the public more. I dare say that new residents coming into the town don't realize the beautiful trails over there by Marlene Stewart Street Park, the John Nemi Trail, and what have you. But I'd just like if you could comment on that, Director, Mr. Marsh. I guess the report was basically to include perhaps even build more trails. Is that what that 6.1 was about?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at the note that was in the minutes.
And I'm sorry I didn't give you a heads up on that. I apologize for that.
That's okay. So I attend these meetings, and the committees, what they want to do is move forward with the ability to update those maps, make sure all of our trail network is identified on those maps. And we know that they're also looking at options of going more digitally and using different types of software. Also updating our trail systems on the various trail websites and maps that are digitally out there, and some of the apps that you can use for those. So if I'm not mistaken, and I apologize, and I don't want to put Councillor Wink on the spot, but he also sits on that committee. He may have some further discussion on that point.
Councillor Wink?
Yeah. So if you look at the minutes, it's we do have maps. We just, in fact, reprinted some of the maps with budget that we've got. We haven't had the opportunity to distribute them, but once the MCC opens up, that will be an avenue that we can get these maps out. We haven't been able to engage the public like we used to. So once things start to get to a normal, we'll get that information out. But if you look at some of the comments within the minutes, that there's other considerations too. And if you look at accessibility considerations, so right now the Steve Bauer Trail is that one section that got paved is really good for accessible individuals, but have we marked on those maps that other trails are accessible for, whether it's someone in a wheelchair or someone who has limited vision or whatever? So there's more work that needs to be done with the information that we're giving out to our residents.
Okay, thank you for that, Councilor Wink. And like I say, your active transportation committee, they've done great work for the town. Again, it's just getting the news out that we do have some fantastic trails in the town for the newcomers into the area. Great, thank you. Any other? Oh, I see, Councilor Hildebrand.
Yeah, I'd like to also echo your comments with regards to great trails. I've been recently using the Jerry Burko Trail, which I hadn't previously used to a large extent, mainly because my one daughter has now moved out to Poth Street in Fenwick. So that's very near the trail. And there are people there with limited disabilities that are using these trails. I've been very pleased to see them walking these trails and how well these trails are maintained. Thank you, Director Marr. I'm pleasantly pleased that there's really clear trails, easily walkable, and even though they're this road dust type of trail out in those situations, they're very passable. Even during downpours and rains, you can go down there and there's no puddles. They're excellent. So I'd just like to comment to everyone, yeah, we have a great trail system for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hildebrand. Any other questions on consent agendas, consent items? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councilor Stewart, seconded by Councilor Wink. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the June 21st, 2021 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved, save and accept items 8.3.2 and 8.5.6 as applicable. And for the vote, I'll start with Councilor Hahn.
Yes.
Councilor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councilor Kaur.
Yes.
Councilor Olson.
Yes.
Councilor Stewart.
Yes.
Councilor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your first lifted item from the agenda, lifted from Councilor Hildebrandt, and this has to is 8.3.2, and it's the Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan. To
Okay.
Councilor Hildebrandt for discussion.
Yeah. Councilor Hildebrand, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd like to comment. One of the items, which is 7.3, which is supporting the community, talks about that we're going to investigate we're going to invest in a new power supply system generator for the MCC to support seamless service. I agree with the statement. I'm just not sure how to address it. And I also didn't know how this climate plan would relate to the directive the council gave with regards to the consultant's emergency management plan. So basically I lifted it because I didn't know whether I need to make a motion to have this addressed by staff or just to bring it to everyone's attention. It would be good enough because we're asked to endorse the climate change adaptation plan at this meeting. So I guess I'm asking a question.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go to the CAO. Any clarification on that, Mr. CAO?
Well, my own thought is that we're talking about one paragraph and one discrete item, and the plan is meant to guide us corporately in how we analyze a whole bunch of variables and plan for the future. So I don't view that as a reason to not proceed forward with the plan. It's to take a look at a discrete item, which, I mean, essentially, council 10 minutes ago gave us directions to come back with further information on. So from where I sit, now it's for you to decide whether you like the plan or not, but I feel like you may already be there. And if that's the case, I don't know that this is an item that should, I mean, you could call it opener and just commentary. And I don't think it's the focus or at the heart or the core of the plan, that from where I sit. But certainly I'm not the climate change coordinator, nor am I the director of public works. And those are two people who are much better informed than am I.
Thank you for that, Mr. CAO. I tend to agree, though, Councilor Hildebrand, that we have taken the first step in the generator or lack of, and how that will bring it up to standard for the emergency building. So I guess Director of Public Works, you have any comments? Myself, I think the plan itself has great steps to go ahead with. And now that we've addressed the generation problem, I don't see why we wouldn't go ahead and pass this adaptation plan. Any thoughts on that, Director of Public Works?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So my thought is that, again, this is a guiding document that guides the corporation, and there's a lot of items in there which take resources with respect to staff and capital dollars. And I think that, you know, this plan gives you an overall guiding document to push forward and strive to complete those items, but doesn't mean you have to hit every item, right? And so the councillor brought up a good point tonight with respect to the generator for the MCC, and if that was going to be used, what does it power? So there's definitely a lot of consideration that needs to go into those decisions when the time comes. And again, those items would be all part of a capital budget that would have to be passed by council prior to proceeding with those projects.
Thank you. Back to you, Councilor Hildebrand.
Yeah, I'm satisfied with the answer if this is just basically a first step.
Yep.
As long as this is just a first step, that's the adaptation we're passing, I'm fine, because obviously when we get the emergency management plan evaluation by a consultant, that'll be another step for looking at it. So I'm satisfied with that.
Okay, and thank you for bringing it to our attention. And your next item, sir.
Oh, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, wait.
If we may then vote on this particular item, I will just read the main motion as originally presented, which would be moved from Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Wink, and it's be it resolved that Council receive report 2021-0109-Public Works entitled Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan for information purposes, and that Council endorse the Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan. For the vote, I would start with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Mr. Mayor, you may move to the next item that was lifted, and that's in regards to the Niagara Escarpment Commission streamlined process for minor development permit applications.
Okay, and Councilor Hildebrand, you pulled that one, I believe.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Niagara Escarpment Commission put out a report for streamlining where they didn't want to circulate minor development permit applications to municipalities. There's a lot of other things with that statement. So that means if they're going to do something in our area and they consider it minor, they don't want to send us any notice. I do not agree with that statement. I think the Niagara Escarpment Commission needs to advise the affected municipality of any, even if it's a minor variance, I disagree with their streamlining process. I guess that's the conclusion that I've come up with.
Okay, Counselor, any comments from any other counselors about this item? I don't see any. Counselor, do you want to?
I'm gonna be making a motion.
Okay.
The amended motion I'm going to present is that the council for the town of Pelham does not support this proposed streamlining process suggested by the Niagara Escarpment Commission for minor development permit applications, and that the council for the town of Pelham support the continued circulation of minor development permit applications to municipalities, and that staff are directed to circulate a copy of this resolution to the Niagara Escarpment Commission for their information.
Okay, and we need a seconder for this, and I see Councillor Kaur is seconding. Any discussion on this motion as presented? Okay, I think myself I'm going to I'm going to vote against it myself. I'm in the Niagara Escarpment Commission. And they do have the #1 say on my farm, and if they rubber stamp anything, or if they say something, the town rubber stamps it. And when they say it is minor, they gave some examples, I believe. I can't pull one out right now out of my hat, but believe me, you can't do too much without, well, you can't do anything usually without them looking over your shoulder and looking at your drawings and looking at a floodplain and what have you. So for them to say a minor situation, I believe it's got to be pretty minor for them to give up their jurisdictional power that they have. So I'm willing to trust them on this. So I will be voting against this motion myself. Thank you. And again, I will ask for any other comments. Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I've watched what's been happening in Toronto with regards to the development of wetlands and what's occurring there. It seems to me that the provincial government is enforcing a lot of these things, forcing development into areas that I don't think are appropriate. And I'm just not in favor of any of those kind of actions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I don't see any other comments or questions, so I will ask the clerk to get the vote.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So this would be the vote on the amendment to include the paragraphs that Councillor Hildebrand cited. That's what this is for. We have the movers, Councillor Hildebrand, seconder, Councillor Kaur, and I'll start the vote with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
And that does carry. So that would bring us to the main motion as amended. Mr. Mayor, if you would like to continue with discussion.
Okay, so now on the motion amended, is there comments or questions on that? And perhaps, Madam Clerk, you can read the motion amended.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. The motion as amended is, be it resolved that Council receive the memo from the Niagara Escarpment Commission regarding streamlined process for minor development permit applications for information, and that Council for the Town of Pelham does not support the proposed streamlining process suggested by the Niagara Escarpment Commission for minor development permit applications, and that Council for the Town of Pelham supports the continued circulation of minor development permit applications to municipalities, and that staff are directed to circulate a copy of this resolution to the Niagara Escarpment Commission for their information.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll ask the question one more time. Any comments or questions on the amended? Councillor Wink?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The report shows the criteria for streamlined applications, and the criteria for the what's deemed minor is, lot coverage, lot line setback height, minor additions, decks, patios, porches, gas main installation. You know, the only one that causes me a little bit of concern is the very last one that says infrastructure within an existing or approved development, so plan a subdivision. That causes me a little bit of angst.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Stewart?
I don't see that it should be an issue for them to inform a municipality of what they're planning to do. You know, as you said, you know, they have control and we may not, you know, be able to change things, but at the very least, we should have the information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any, Councillor Wink?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Planning. Generally, if right now a minor issue comes to you, what actually happens with that? So if someone wants to put on a porch, we get notified. Generally, what's done with that information?
Ms. Weens?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So yes, with Niagara Escarpment development permit applications, they are all circulated to the town. We circulate those internally to other departments such as Public Works and Building, and we get staff comments together, and then planning staff write a report, typically in a letter, to the committee or to the Niagara Escarpment Commission with any conditions that town feel are appropriate. So for these minor works or minor applications, these are usually very small types of development. They don't typically come with issues. And, you know, our only comment is that they generally require a building permit, and they would regardless whether there's a Niagara Escarpment development permit or not. And so we typically would see them anyway through a building permit process. You know, it is time consuming, and, you know, it takes a bit of time for us to review and circulate and provide comments back. Typically with these minor applications, we don't generally have issues or concerns because the development is so small.
Councillor Wink?
No, so thank you. So essentially it's just saying this will eliminate some staff work. It's more of a routine in nature of what you're doing for these minor issues.
Is that correct, Ms. Wink or Ms. Weens?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, that is correct. I mean, the Niagara Escarpment Commission would still issue a development permit. We would still be notified of when a permit is being issued for these, but they won't be circulating to us for review and comment because they are, you know, routine in nature.
Okay.
And so they themselves are trying to streamline their process to find efficiencies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments before we call the vote? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The mover will be Councillor Hildebrandt and Councillor Kaur. And for the vote, start with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
And that does carry. Mr. Mayor, through you, that does bring us to our next item on the agenda, which is item 10.2.1. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0085 Corporate Services 2022 Budget Schedule, and that Council approve the 2022 Budget Schedule. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. on this item? Any questions, debate, comments? And I see Councilor Hildebrand.
As usual, I'll make the same motion I've made probably for several years in a row, that the 2022 budget schedule be amended to strike consideration for the capital budget consideration for council approval on Monday, December 20th, and replace the date with January the 24th, 2022.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder for that? I see Councillor Hahn will second. And before I go back to the rest of the council, Councillor Hildebrand, would you like to explain your reasons for this, please?
Absolutely. I think it was invaluable that we waited this year till January to have the budget approved. Again, we're in a pandemic year, and I think there's a possibility for getting funding for pandemic. Also, the fact is, if there's any projects that require release of an RFQ prior to the release of the capital budget, that's something that we could consider separately at the capital budget approval stage. So I see no reason why it should be a problem. And the fact is, if we approve the capital budget prior to having the operating budget at the same time, there's little flexibility for me as a councillor to adjust the tax rate. To me, I need both budgets to affect the tax rate effectively, because the capital budget is really the area where I can make significant changes. And that's the reason for my motion to delay approval of the capital budget to January 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hahn, you second it. Have you any comments or not?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I would agree in that if we look at what happened this year, we did have some debate and there was definitely some opposition to taking this stance. And then in the end, it was a good thing that we did. So nobody knows what's going to happen with COVID. Hopefully the end is near, but we don't know. So if we look at, this running a little longer, I think that it would be wise to take the same position we took last year.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wink, I see your hand.
Yeah, so might want to get a bit of clarification from our treasurer, but the capital budget doesn't affect tax rate. The capital budget is funded through grants and reserves. It's just the operating and wastewater budgets that will affect the tax rate. So, I just want clarification from the director on that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Quinlan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to last year's budget, if I recall that the capital budget was approved on December 16th, it is the operating budget that we were waiting for, the operating and the wastewater budget that we moved to January. So when we established the budget, there's a certain dollar amount that we allocate for the reserves, and then we do a certain percentage increase on the reserves, and that funds the capital. So the capital increase isn't that large. That depends on the projects. I think it is important that the capital projects are approved before January, because we do like to, go out, have the opportunity to go out for RFPs sooner rather than later. It was the operating budget that we had to wait for the COVID funding. The Finance and Audit Committee discussed the 2022 budget schedule, and they supported the schedule. I mean, we've started right now. Last week, we started the 2022 budget. So we finished year end, a few weeks ago, and we're into the 2022 budget right now. We're working hard, throughout the summer and early fall to get the numbers in. And, for the purpose of having the numbers sooner rather than later, a month earlier is helpful for us for the projects. And last year it was approved before year end.
Thank you for that. Mr. CAO, additional comments?
Well, firstly, to Councillor Hahn's point, she's correct, and I don't think we've ever publicly said it, but Last year, staff, we were opposed to moving the operating water budgets to January of this calendar year, and council overruled us, and you were right to do so. By getting that extra time, we did in fact find out we got extra funding from the province, and it did have a big impact on the rate increase and on the operating budget. So council, last year it was a really good move to hold off those two budgets till January. And this year we've come back trying to follow the same. We can't prove, I can't emphasize enough the reason. Firstly, capital budget has virtually either no or virtually no impact on a tax increase. And secondly, I don't know yet we can ever prove with absolute certainty that coming in, being the first in Niagara to get our capital budget, what it saves us. But this year, I mean, we just came in, I think, 300,000 under budget for the next phase of the Pelham reconstruction. And I don't have a way to prove that that's the factor because I can't isolate the other variables. But it is conventional wisdom that the first to market wins the prize. And our biggest construction project this year, 300,000 under. So there are huge, as much as we can be confident in telling you, economic theory certainly supports doing this in December. And our most recent experience, we think, also supports that notion. And lastly, we took this to the Finance and Audit Committee and they approved this, right? So the external accountants who are giving us advice and have become experts in our books have endorsed this course of action. And I think that ought to be said.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. I see Councillor Olson now.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I had to check see it wasn't on mute, but yes, we discussed this at considerable length at the Finance and Audit Committee, and we discussed all the timing of the need for a capital budget and the wastewater budget and the operating budgets, and it was determined that this was the probably the most advantageous way of doing it, and certainly the way we could get more get on the market first for our quotations, and we were told about the $300,000 savings. So I think the committee, I think we were very strong in the in support of this type of a budget motion or this type of a budget schedule, and it allows time for the public and allows time for consultation and consideration of it. And I would certainly want to keep the budget schedule the way it's laid out in the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, I'm just wondering, is there any net difference whether we pass this tonight or at our next council meeting? I mean, we're only on the, what is it, 21st of June right now? Is there some substantial difference between passing this tonight or waiting to the next council meeting?
I will ask the treasurer, Ms. Quinlan.
Well, we definitely could wait to the next council meeting because it is July. We are following, once council gives us approval to move forward, we are following this schedule. So right now we are doing all the work that needs to get done to follow the schedule. So we're following the schedule. And if it means that, you know, the approval doesn't happen in December until January, then the budget just sits there. I mean, we're still going to continue with our schedule. So yeah, we can wait till July.
Right, because either way, whether you pass it tonight or whether you wait until July, you're still going to hum along, you know, doing what you have to do on your end, irregardless. So
right, that's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
I see Councillor Wink, you've got your hand up.
Yes. So my question would be, what would change between tonight and the next council meeting that would change the outlook on this? Like, I don't understand why we have to defer it and why we can't make a decision.
Well, to answer your question, Councillor Wink, I'm just looking at the bigger picture, and that is we might have a better idea in a month's time where we're headed from a COVID perspective, and how things might look, things shape up, whether or not there might be another grant coming down the pipe, whether or not it's over. mean, there's a lot of things we don't know, and just another month, if it doesn't make any difference either way, then why not wait another month?
But we're not approving any of these budgets at this point in time anyway. So we're approving the capital budget in December and the operating and wastewater in January. So whatever happens in the next month has no bearing on this schedule.
So then why the rush to pass it tonight?
Well, it's more, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, is that it went to the Finance and Audit Committee and they brought forward a recommendation to bring it to council. So that's why it's here tonight. And also it provides guidance to staff to know when we have to, for example, September 13th is the public meeting. So we know we have to get that meeting in our schedule and, and let the public know that that's when the public meeting is.
Thank you. Councilor Olson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and we have volunteer professionals on our committee, and I would hate to see us make a lot of adjustments to their schedule because these are volunteers, and we have to. We're asking them for their time, and they're providing it, and they're giving us excellent advice. And I just don't think it's right to be changing it and adjusting schedules that might affect their schedules.
Thank you. Councilor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. All we're asking at this point is to delay it for 1 month, and all we're talking about is the capital budget. I think delaying it gives us more time to make an accurate decision. You've provided us with more information. This is not the first time I've brought up this type of motion. It's at least the second time. And I would cancel my motion that I've made and just make the motion to delay the approval till the next council meeting.
Let me ask the clerk. So, Madam Clerk, he's changed his motion. Is that allowed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, he's asked to withdraw his motion and replace it with another motion, if I'm hearing correctly, to refer it back and to have it brought back to the July 23rd meeting. I would just ask if his seconder has any issue with that.
Councilor Hahn, are you prepared to second that motion?
Sure.
Okay, so why don't we, without further discussion, can we please vote on the Councilor Hildebrand's motion, and then we'll go from there on the original motion. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor, if it's no longer the amendment, but it's a motion to refer back to staff and to bring it back to July 23rd, that would end the debate, and we would not be going back to the main motion.
Okay. Yep.
It would just be referring the report back to staff to bring back in July, at the July meeting. So if council wished, they could debate this, refer back to staff.
Any other further debates on this? We've sort of kicked the can around the block. I think it's time to have a vote. Not seeing any other questions or comments. Madam Clerk?
Okay, so this would be to refer back to staff and to bring the report back to the July 23rd meeting. For the vote, I'll start with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
So that is defeated, and that would bring us back to our main motion. Just for council's clarity, if that's okay, I would like to read that into the record again. So it brings us back to the main motion, and that's be it resolved that council receive report 2021-0085 corporate services-2022 budget schedule, and that council approve the 2022 budget schedule. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for debate.
Okay, so we're back to the original motion. Any other questions, comments on this motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the original motion, I'll start with Councillor Hahn.
The original motion, so just for clarity, then you're asking without the amendment. Okay, so no.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hildebrandt.
No.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is 10.2.2. And I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0114 Corporate Services Green and Inclusive Community Building Grant, and that Council approve the 2 grant applications for a new library at the Meridian Community Center and the retrofit of Town Hall for public restrooms and event facilities with the Green and Inclusive Community Building Grants. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you for that. I was wondering, first of all, before I went to council, Ms. Quinlan, do you have any further comments to make on these grants? I know you and your team searched them out.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, we have the 2 projects that were brought forward in the ICIP Cultural, Community, and Recreation Grant in 2019. That we submitted actually three or four applications for that project. If you recall, one is the Marlene Stewart Street pool, and then we had all the retrofits to the recreation areas. We had the addition on a town hall for events like the public washrooms to be permanently outside the building and an event room. And then also we had the big ask, which was the addition of the library at the MCC. So we still haven't officially heard back on those grants, but so we're just still waiting for that. But in the meantime, we still see the library addition to the MCC as, you know, a project that we would like to move forward. It meets the definition of a new build, even though it's attached to the MCC. It still would be like a standalone building, and we're looking at that application. And then also the other one would be a retrofit to Town Hall, which would be the public washrooms and the event room. And then in that application, we would also do some of the energy savings, such as changing the windows in Town Hall and looking at some of the HVAC systems to make it more energy efficient. So we're trying to take advantage of this green grant and applying for that.
Thank you for the further comments. Any other questions and comments on these grants and the application of? Councillor Hahn?
Through the mayor, to the Director of Corporate Services, just for clarity, did I hear you mention that the standalone building, I'm sorry, were you referring to the library as being a standalone building at the MCC? It's not.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, the library will be attached to the MCC, but the actual building, the HVAC system and all that would be a definition of a standalone building.
Oh, okay.
But it would have an opening to the MCC. And one of the things that we're looking at, and I was waiting to talk about it during this grant, is that when we applied for the library addition the first time, we did include the generator in there. And so we would like to include the generator for the MCC in this application if we can. There are some questions there under this grant to see if this building, you know, could be used for like an emergency building, and since it is attached to the MCC, we're going to see if we can, you know, apply for the generator through that grant. I mean, it's a stretch, but, you know, my philosophy is if you don't try, for sure you won't get it. So, you know, we always go out and try to get that. We have connected with Petroff, the architects for the MCC, and their technical team is working on the technical aspect of this grant application, which is all of the terminology for the carbon zero materials that are required. So they're doing that part, and we're doing the rest of the application. And I was at the library board meeting last month to provide an update on their financial results, and I also gave them an update of the grant, and the library board is still very excited about this project.
Okay.
Thank you very much for all your work on this.
Thank you, Councillor. And to the Director of Finance, we're still in awe of the magic you worked last year on the COVID application. So we know you're going to give this another 110%. Any other questions? Councillor Hildebrand.
Here you, Mr. Mayor. To the Corporate Director, I'd like to also lend my support to your report with regard to the library. Our expert on the committee is Dave Cano, who services the town of Oakville as their energy efficiency expert. And they have an carbon zero building that they've already engineered in their facility. And he's well acquainted with all the facets required to produce the reports to do this. So if our committee and Dave Cano can be of any assistance, we've had some initial discussions at our meeting with regards to carbon zero buildings. So we'll be glad to assist you if you need anything done through our committee and through Dave Cano. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Very generous of you, Councillor Hildebrand. And the committee is obviously a good reference tool. Any other comments? Not seeing any. I'll have the clerk conduct the vote.
Thank you. The vote will begin with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item on the agenda. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0103, Mandatory Face Covering Bylaw Extension, and that Council hereby resolves to extend the Mandatory Face Covering Bylaw 4270-2020 as amended until the revocation, repeal, or remove of requirements related to the wearing of face coverings prescribed by orders issued by the province pursuant to the Reopening Ontario Act 2020 SO 2020, and that the town clerk be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw amendment extending the requirement for mandatory face coverings in the town of Pelham for consideration at the next regular council meeting. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for debate. And I would just note for the record that Councillor Stewart has muted herself and turned off her camera as she's declared a conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you for that, Madam Clerk. On this item on the agenda, any questions or comments regarding the face covering item? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk. Call the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start the vote with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry.
And is someone going to inform Councillor Stewart?
I do see Councillor Stewart has returned back to the meeting. Thank you very much.
Welcome back, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to our next item on the agenda, item 10.2.4. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0110 Clerks, Amendment to Procedural Bylaw to permit continued electronic participation in meetings until March 31st, 2022, and that the proposed amendments to the Town of Pelham Procedural Bylaw as outlined in Appendix 1 be approved, thereby facilitating electronic meeting participation until March 31st, 2022 for Council, Special Council, Committee of Adjustment, Committee of Council, and Advisory Committees, and that the Clerk be directed to present the necessary bylaw at the next regular meeting of Council on July 26, 2021. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. On this item on the agenda, any questions or comments to make on this agenda item? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to commend the clerk and all the staff and the IT staff for the great results and fact that we can operate effectively, I believe, through the medium and these meetings that we're doing electronically. I don't think we've missed much of a beat, and I will definitely support the motion as presented.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. I will agree with every comment you made there. Any other comments or questions? I'll ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote will begin with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to our next item on the agenda, and it is item 10.2.5, and I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2021-0108 for information, and that Council endorse the growth allocation for Pelham of 9,500 people, 2,300 jobs, and 4,100 households for the year of 2051, and that Council endorse the 25% intensification target for the town of Pelham, and that Council endorse the land need assessment of 40 hectare of additional urban land for the town of Pelham, and that Council endorses that portion of Area 1 as identified in Report 2021-0108 that is not included in the Greenbelt Plan area, and that the portion of Area 2 as identified in Report 2021-0108 that is the east of Pelham Street to the Welland border and the west of Pelham Street to a depth of 130 meters be considered by the Niagara region for future urban boundary expansion, and that a copy of this report be provided to the Niagara region for information. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And again, perhaps before I turn to council, I will hopefully not put the Director of Planning on the spot. I didn't tell her ahead of time I'd be asking for her comments, but Ms. Weens, do you have any comments on the motion put forward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report summarizes the growth projections and the allocation of that growth, in particular to Pelham, but we also provide information in terms of how it's allocated across the region. And with that growth allocation, there are density and intensification targets that together help inform what our urban land needs would be in the future. So the report summarizes those things, and you can see in the report where Pelham stands against other communities in Niagara with respect to the growth allocation, both in terms of population and employment, and the intensification targets, the various density areas, and then the urban land needs across the region. So as a whole, the town of Pelham over the next 30 years is expected to grow by approximately 9,300 people, and then an additional 2,000 jobs are coming our way. And the analysis that the region undertakes in terms of determining the lands that are needed, they follow the provincial methodology in doing that evaluation and that assessment, and has determined that Pelham is going to need about 40 hectares of additional urban land to satisfy our growth needs. With respect to the density and intensification targets, Pelham is projected to have an intensification target of 25%, and the density in our greenfield will be 50 persons and jobs per hectare, which is what is allocated in the growth plan. And the only other comment with respect to the intensification targets is that the region has identified and treated municipalities across the region differently. They did not give us all a 50% intensification target. Rather, they looked at each individual municipality's ability to accommodate intensification and its geographic context vis-a-vis greenbelt boundaries and natural heritage feature areas and so forth. And so you can see that across the region, there will be varying intensification targets for different municipalities. In Pelham, it's proposed to be 25%. And then across the region, on average, it would be 56%, which is just above the minimum target established in the growth plan the provincial growth plan, A Place to Grow for the Greater Golden Horseshoe.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Weens, for that, for those words. Thank you. Okay, questions on the on this item of the agenda? And Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be making a motion, but I'll be discussing it before I make this motion. Number one, back on June the 7th at our last council meeting, we had correspondence from the region asking us to respond to the regional draft plan, official plan. And at that time, I provided a motion with regards to the intensification target that the region had adopted for themselves. And thus I'm making a motion to divide and separate this motion to address that. And the other area I'm going to be addressing is intensification, because I believe that intensification at 25% target for town of Pelham is good if it's based on the number of approved units, as per the residential development monitoring report that we received from planning on March the 1st. Now, what I just I'm not sure of what is meant by this report when you talk about approved units, because that's one of the terms I'm going to be using in the motion that I prepared. Can the Director of Planning please address that for me?
Ms. Weens?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, through you. So the approved units are what are approved through a planning application. So in the report, the residential monitoring report that staff had prepared and was presented to council the beginning of March of this year, that laid out and summarized various development approvals that were in the greenfield areas, the various ones that were approved in the built up areas, which is where the intensification occurs. And that report summarized that we are achieving the 25% target in terms of development that's being approved for intensification. Currently, our intensification target is 15%, so we are exceeding that 15%, and it is at a 25%. So it would include the approved plans.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Thank you. So I'm going to be making a motion to divide and separate the present motion for separate consideration.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to do that now or after further debate by council?
Well, I think that's a motion that'll have to be supported by a different councillor, but the clerk can possibly clarify that.
Should we call a seconder now then?
Thank you. Through our procedural bylaw, the request to divide is simply a request and is not required to be seconded. So whenever council wishes for me to start calling on each portion of that resolution, I'm happy to do so when council has finished its debate.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to other councillors, debate or questions or comments, and I see Councillor Wink.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. Couple of things that just like comment on. The first one is there's a number of residents on the east side of Rice Road that have expressed being included in the urban boundary, but does not appear to be included in this proposed urban plan. Can you make comment on that, please?
Ms. Weens?
Yes, so Mr. Mayor, through you, the regions received requests for urban boundary expansions as part of their official plan review and update. And so those requests that they've received have been in 5 areas in Pelham. And so in my report, I identify where those 5 areas are. And area 1 is land on the east side of Rice Road. Area 2 is lands that are south of the urban boundary of Fonthill and in between the urban boundary of Welland. Areas 3 and 4 are off of Effingham Street, and area 5 is off of Regional Road 20, Highway 20. So the properties that I believe you're referring to are within Area 1.
So just to confirm that they will be included then.
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, I cannot confirm that. I mean, that will be the next step, is that the region will have to make some determination of where urban boundary expansion would go. In our report, the staff report is recommending that Area 1 be included. And so if council were to endorse the staff recommendation, that information would go to the region and would help them and inform their decision on where the urban boundary should go. So staff are recommending that Area 1 be included, except for a small piece that's in the Greenbelt plan, and that a portion of Area 2 be included in the proposed urban boundary expansion.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wink?
So one more through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. So can you make comment regarding that there's no consideration of urban boundary expansion in Fenwick? So it's all being done in Font Hill, So,
Mr. Mayor, through you, so there were no requests for urban boundary expansions in and around Fenwick that were received by the region. Fenwick is surrounded by the Greenbelt plan, except for the very south limit down by Foss Road. If there were to be consideration to expand Fenwick, they would have to take into consideration some servicing constraints that exist there. So that would also be a factor in any future decision making with respect to potential boundary expansions in Fenwick. So I want to be clear that these areas that were identified for future urban boundary expansion, these are based on requests that people have made to the region. The region will be considering these requests along with all the requests in all the other local municipalities as well. And they've included and identified some screening criteria under which they will evaluate these requests to determine if they are good candidates for urban boundary expansion. And once they've finished that analysis, then they'll identify where their preferred areas will be. And that will ultimately inform the new Region of Niagara official plan. Their criteria were included as an appendix to the region's report. I'm not sure if council, went to the Region of Niagara's report. It's quite lengthy. It's several hundred pages long, and it did include kind of the appendix. One of the appendix included the criteria under which they would evaluate requests for urban boundary expansion. So it is a significant decision for, not only for this municipality, but for the region to make. They've identified that there's a need for, across the region, some 400 hectares of land, 460 hectares of land. And in Pelham, we are proposed to receive about 40 hectares of that land.
okay, thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And just, if I may, and whether it's relevant or not, I believe the city of Welland has just applied for increasing their urban boundaries. Was it 160 hectares, Ms. Waynes? Do you remember that figure?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, the city of Welland did get an urban boundary expansion that was approved in January this year by the region. And so their boundary does butt up against the town of Pelham urban boundary. And you would see on the map that's shown in the report, the staff report, where I've identified the 5 areas, that portion of Welland that is in kind of the tan or the buff colored, that is their urban boundary. And you can see where it comes up and abuts the town of Pelham's urban boundary, which is the pink color. So if we were to receive Area 1 got approval for urban boundary expansion, it would butt up against the city of Welland.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Thanks. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Hahn?
Through the mayor, I'd just like to mention as well, I fully support it, especially in Area 1 that you've identified, because it's something like 6 homes that have just kind of been left out of that. And oddly enough, it's also right where the plan is for the region and municipalities to work together to push forward on the expansion to the 406 on merit. So, you know, it only seems to stand to reason that that area should be included. And that, and the fact we've got Saffron and all the other developments just so close to that area. So they've just kind of left in the lurch for quite some time, but definitely supportive of ensuring that they're put in. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hildebrand.
I'm also supportive of what Councillor Wink and Councillor Hahn have just mentioned. Those residents butt up against the approved area of regional expansion for Welland, and like you said, the development of Merritt Road. So I think they deserve to be included in the expansion. I appreciate the planning department has included that in the resolution. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I saw Councillor Stewart's hand.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little curious about the time frame of all of this, as the census is not quite yet complete. And I was wondering, you know, because a lot of what this is about is based on our last census. So do you know if the census results from this will get factored in at all?
Ms. Weens?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, so in 2019, the province approved the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, an update to that. And it is in that growth plan that identified the population growth for Niagara. So it's based on those numbers that we are allocating growth, and it is over a 30-year planning horizon to 2051. So when the new 2021 census information comes out, that's typically about 2 or 3 year lag before we see that information. And it'll be interesting to see at that time when that comes out, if these projections will need to be updated or revised at that time. I would be speculating if I were to say yes or no at this right now. So I don't want to speculate, but certainly once we get those numbers, both the province and you know, other governments will be looking at all of those projections and determining whether or not any updates need to be made.
Thank you. I didn't realize that it takes that long for the census results. And one other question. It said, I don't have the phrase in front of me, about permitted. So that would also include secondary dwelling units. I just want to be assured that those will be counted both as intensification and density for the town of Pelham.
Ms. Weens?
So yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, they would certainly be counted towards intensification. As I indicated during the public meeting on second dwelling units, it's very difficult to include second dwelling units in the density calculations. We do those density calculations at the time a subdivision is approved. And at that time, we have no idea how many units would have second dwelling units or not. So it's difficult to make a calculation for second dwelling units in density, but we can certainly include them in intensification. And the region in their numbers do have a factor for second dwelling units in the intensification targets.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Kaur, I thought I saw your hand up.
Yes, you did, through you, Mr. Mayor. In Area 1 on the, I presume on the east side, that's Thorold, if I'm not mistaken, to the director.
Go ahead, Ms. Weens?
So the area that's identified as Area 1 on the east side of Rice Road is in the town of Pelham. The area just outside of Area 1, further to the east, is in Thorold. But that boundary of Area 1 is the boundary, the municipal boundary for the town of Pelham.
I will be supporting making sure the urban boundaries do expand for Area 1. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. There has been a request to have the motion divided for each individual resolution. I will use the same mover being Councillor Hildebrandt with the same seconder being Councillor Kaur. And for the first resolution, it would be it resolved that Council receive report number 2021-0108 for information. Unless there's any more debate, I'll call for the vote. Okay, I'll start with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that carries. That brings us to the next paragraph, and it is, and that council endorse the growth allocation for Pelham of 9,500 people, 2,300 jobs, and 4,100 households to the year of 2051. Mr. Mayor, for discussion?
Okay. Any, on this resolution or motion, any comments or questions? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that carries. The next vote is, and that council endorse the 25% intensification target for the town of Pelham. Mr. Mayor, to you for consideration.
Yes.
Discussion.
Any debate on this? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, I will be making an amendment to the motion.
Okay, Councillor, go ahead.
Basically, the amendment I'm going to be making follows my directive or my motion that I presented on June the 7th. Here's the motion. Whereas the provincial place to grow growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe requires the region of Niagara to have a minimum intensification target of 50% over a 30-year planning horizon to 2051. And whereas the region of Niagara is in the process of undertaking a new regional of Niagara official plan to conform with the provincial place to grow growth plan for the Golden Horseshoe. And whereas the region of Niagara is proposing an intensification target of 56% to 2051 for the region in the proposed new region of Niagara official plan. And whereas the proposed region is seeking input from local municipalities on the new region of Niagara official plan. Now, therefore, the town of Pelham recommends that the region of Niagara incorporate a minimum intensification target of 50% to 2051, not 56% in the new region of Niagara official plan. And council endorses the 25% intensification target for the town of Pelham based on the number of approved units. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And is there a seconder for that amendment? And I see Councillor Kaur. Debate or questions, comments on this amendment? Okay, well, I won't be supporting it. I'm all for intensification. You're either for intensification or you're for farmland. There is no yes or no. Maybe we can do both. You're either going to intensify or you're going to have urban sprawl going from Fort Erie to Grimsby to Waterloo to wherever. That's all there is to it. You gotta make a stand. You either what you are. The planners, the province, That's why they have intensification to try to cut down on urban sprawl. And I will not support this motion. Thank you. Councillor Hildebrand.
I understand intensification. I understand what the government has commissioned to us. They've commissioned a 10% increase from 40 to 50%. That's a 25% intensification factor. That's a huge step. The region of what they're drafting is virtually going up to a 40% intensification factor. I think the region has to walk before they can run. I mean, I'm not sure whether they've got a plan that justifies going up by 40% intensification, but that's a huge change. So it's not that I'm against intensification. I agree with intensification, but let's walk before you run. And that's why I'm proposing that the region sticks with the government's proposal of going to 50%. That's what they've committed, and that's what we should do. If we attain 56%, great. I have no problem with it. But let's stick with a goal that we can achieve rather than putting a goal out there that I'm not sure is achievable. And that's why I've presented this motion tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. I see Councillor Cora, you believe you had your hand?
No, I probably was combing my hair.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a cheap comb, your hand. Okay, any other comments? I see Councillor Olson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So according to this motion, the intensification of 25% would stay the same for the town of Pelham. Is that correct?
That's exactly what the planning department has recommended. That's correct.
So the other part about Niagara region, we're recommending to the region what they should do. Is that what this is?
They asked for our comment. I'm responding to their request. They've asked all municipalities to comment. If you read the minutes from the June the 7th email that we received from the region, they're asking for our council's comment. And this is my comment as a councillor to the region to their request for a comment on their official plan. Yes.
Councillor Olson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for the comment about the minutes. I did read the minutes, and I do read my mail. I think this is really just, there's got to be a better avenue and another avenue, and it was defeated in the last council meeting, I think. So I'm going to be voting against this simply because there has to be another mechanism of getting your message to the region.
Sorry, Councillor Olson, it was not defeated. We delayed it. The CAO advised us that we would be getting a report, and I amended the motion to delay my motion till this council meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, through you, thank you for that further correction. I will still be voting no.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hahn?
Through the mayor. So just so I'm clear on this, this motion or amendment. So essentially the provincial government is saying to the region, hey, 50%, that's what we need here. And the region's saying, nope, let's go with 56%. So I have to go with what the province is telling, and I don't know why we're trying to be overachievers on 56%. Let's shoot for 50 to begin with. So I'll be supporting this. And by supporting it, I'm essentially supporting the provincial government and their decision to have it at 50%. And as far as providing this information, I mean, the ship may have already sailed, but I guess this is, I'm thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Hildebrand, that your thinking is this is a way of providing input, which is what was requested of us some time ago to the region. So whether they take it or not, it's up to them, but this is the input that they at least requested, correct?
That's correct. They requested the input from council by July the 2nd for each municipality. And this is my response to the region from this council.
So this is our token voice that we're able to have. Because really, I mean, we're limited in what we can do anyhow as municipal councillors, quite frankly. So this is our token opportunity to have a voice, and if they listen to us, great. But you know, I wouldn't put my bottom dollar on it. But thanks for putting this forward.
Thank you.
I'd like to perhaps Ms. Weens, as a planner, what do you think the region's rationale is of going from 50 and boosting it up to 56? Please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So in the report that I prepared, it included the proposed intensification rates that the region is going to be recommending for all of the local municipalities across the region. And so Fort Erie is 50%, Grimsby 98%, Lincoln is 80%, Niagara Falls is 50%. Niagara-on-the-Lake is 25%, Pelham is 25%, Port Colborne 30%, St. Catharines 95%, Thorold is 25%, Wainfleet is 0 because they do not have any urban areas, Welland is 60%, and West Lincoln is 13%. So that is on, when you add all of those up and divide it by the number of municipalities, you get an average of 56% across the region. And that is how the region determined or came to 56% versus 50%.
Okay, thank you.
If it's going to be something less than 56%, it will also mean that there will be a correspondingly need to expand urban boundaries more. So I think when the region was doing this, they're trying to balance growth and where growth should go and protect our agricultural areas and our natural areas, and understanding that each municipality is different and each municipality has a different capacity to accommodate intensification based on their geography, and that is how they came to the 56%. So it's the average across the entire region, not any one municipality.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Councilor Wink, I see your hand.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we're still recommending about, we're going to endorse a 25% the target for the town of Pelham, as opposed to the other part. Aren't we just splitting hairs? And I don't see that. I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Hildebrand, but are we going to be able to impact anything, particularly if we're saying, yeah, we're good with 25%?
Thank you.
That's just my comment. So I think we're all in agreement of the 25%.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments before we call the vote? Not seeing any. Councillor Stewart. Are you getting ready to vote?
Yeah, No, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Weens. Thank you for the full explanation. It just sounded like 56% across the board, but I feel sorry for, was it Grimsby? That's like 98%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. I will turn to the clerk and ask her to perform the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is for we're just voting on the amendment that was put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Kaur. And for the vote, I'll begin with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
So the amendment loses, and therefore we go back to the main motion. For just clarity, I will read it back into the record, and that council endorses the 25% intensification target for the town of Pelham. And is there any other discussion?
Any other discussion on this motion? Not seeing any.
Thank you. This will begin with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Counselor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Counselor Core,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin,
Yes.
and that carries. The next motion is, and that council endorse the land needs assessment for 40 hectare of additional urban land for the town of Pelham. Mr. Mayor, for you for discussion.
Okay. On this motion, is there any further questions or discussion? I'm not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This begins with Counselor Stewart,
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Counselor Hahn,
Yes.
Counselor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Counselor Core,
Yes.
Counselor Olson,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that does carry. The next is, and that council endorse that portion of Area 1 as identified in Report 2021-0108 that is not included in the Greenbelt Plan area, and that portion of Area 2 as identified in Report 2021-0108 that is east of Pelham Street and to the Welland border, and the west of Pelham Street to a depth of 130 meters be considered by the Niagara region for future urban boundary expansion. Mr. Mayor, to you for discussion.
Yep. Any comments, questions on this one? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Counselor Hahn,
Yes.
Counselor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Counselor Core,
Yes.
Counselor Olson,
Yes.
Counselor Stewart,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin,
Yes.
and that does carry. Mr. Mayor, the last is, and that a copy of this report be provided to the Niagara region for information. For discussion?
Any discussion on this one? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This begins with Counselor Hahn,
Yes.
Counselor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Counselor Core,
Yes.
Counselor Olson,
Yes.
Counselor Stewart,
Yes.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin,
Yes.
and that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your next item on the agenda, which is presentations and consideration of bylaws. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that council for the town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1. Bylaw 4352-2021, being a bylaw to exempt blocks 31, 32, 33, 34, and 36 on Plan 59M-476 from part lot control, Saffron Meadows, Phase 2, Hurt Inc., file number PLC 01-2021. 2. Bylaw 4358-2021, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 4299-2020 as amended to establish 2021 fees and charges to be collected by the corporation of the town of Pelham, and to amend Schedule 1 Recreation and Culture Services to provide for Meridian Community Center arena advertising fees. Mr. Mayor, to you for discussion.
Okay. Any questions or comments on these bylaws as presented? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Core,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin,
Yes.
and that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to our next item on the agenda, which is motions 14.1. Councillor Hildebrandt has a motion on the agenda. If Councillor Hildebrandt would like to read his motion into the record, that would be fine. Alternatively, he can ask me.
Councillor Hildebrandt, do you wish to read it?
Yes, I'd be glad to read that. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do this again.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Whereas the position of CAO is the only staff the council is directly responsible for hiring and managing performance. Now, whereas the town of Pelham lacks a performance evaluation system and associated corporate policy to assess the CAO position, and whereas that the relationship between the municipal council and the public service is a key determinant of the success of any municipality, An effective working partnership between the council and the CAO can be one of the most critical prerequisites for municipal success. Further, local elected officials rely on the CAO to be the link between them and the municipal operations, to implement the town of Pelham's policies and programs, to help council achieve their strategic goals and objectives, including the overall efficiencies of the corporation. Informing effective decision-making on the range of assessment factors, including core competence, performance metrics, behaviors, and how to support the CAO toward a goal achievement with view to fostering open, impartial, transparent, continuous assessment. Now, therefore, the council directs the human resources staff to prepare a draft corporate policy for a formal annual assessment of the CAO position at the town of Pelham and a formal annual performance evaluation process for the CAO, which will be developed with reference to municipal best practices for such assessments and performance evaluations, and which will be brought to council for consideration and approval on August the 23rd, 2021. Once approved, the policy will be implemented for use within the 2021-22 evaluation period. However, the performance of the CAO during the 21-22 evaluation period prior to approval and implementation of the policy will be evaluated with reference to the performance objectives and draft requirements in place prior to the approval and implementation of the policy. Council and the CAO will meet in closed session in September to set performance targets for 2021 and 22 evaluation period. Thank you so much for allowing me to read this long, lengthy motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hildebrand. On the motion, so first of all, we need a seconder. I see Councillor Hahn has got her hand up, so she will be seconding the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I guess, Councillor Hildebrand, any other comments on your motion?
Yes. If council will remember, back in April, our PR department, Public Relations Department, Ms. Langor, issued a policy and procedure by AMO with regards to CAO performance monitoring policy and procedures. She did that at my request. I called her in April because I thought we would have had a policy and procedure to deal with this. I was surprised to learn that we didn't have an official written policy and procedures. As council, our job is to develop policies and procedures. And I think this is critical for all of us to make sure we're all going down those roads in the same direction and together. And that's the reason for this motion. It's not meant as a negative, it's meant as a positive. My background, I came through University of Waterloo, and basically every 8 months, we got a performance evaluation on our work experience and from the university through the co-op department. Obviously, I worked for a big corporation, and the keys to performance evaluations were well defined for all of us. Everyone knew where they were going, what was expected of them, and how they were doing. There should never be any surprises in any of these things. And basically, that's what I'm trying to establish here tonight. To try and establish a policy, the best practice, and work together to achieve the best results.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hildebrand. And Councillor Hahn, you second in the motion. Any comments on it?
Through the mayor, yes, I'm surprised that we don't already have a policy. I'm shocked, actually. I don't know what the previous council did. I guess they didn't have one. But I mean, I think it's really important that there's two-way communication, and to Councillor Hildebrand's point, that we jointly go down the road together. And again, it's not a negative. This is a positive. I think it's important that you know where you stand on both sides of the fence, and work together to move forward. So. Yeah, I look forward to this, and I hope that our HR coordinator will work to achieve this by August 23rd, and then we can look forward to having this policy in place for future councils as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hahn. And I see Councillor Olson with his hand up.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is the essential missing link to what to our whole process of human resources management, and I'll be voting in favor of this. I think this is something that the staff will look forward to as well, being able to be evaluated on a fixed and and impartial, objective scale, and I think this is important, so I'll definitely vote yes for this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Olson. Councillor Wink.
So I agree with everything that everyone said with respect to a need for a formalized evaluation system. My concern is that we're going to be implementing this system right at the end of the year term of the CAO. So, Councillor Hildebrand, you said that you have regular reviews and whatever. And when I worked in at the credit union, like we set goals and targets with everyone at the beginning of the year. We met with those individuals on a monthly basis, and I'm not suggesting that we as a council are going to meet with the CAO on a monthly basis. But we went and sat down with them and told them what they were doing well and what they could do better and how they were working towards their goals. Then we did a semi-annual review. And then at the annual review, there wasn't any surprises because they knew exactly what they did and where they were. What we're being asked for now is at the end of the 1 year, we're changing that target. We're changing the way of the assessment. And I'm all for everything that you said, except for the very end that the CAO is going to be measured on something after the year end has been done. I don't think that's being fair to the individual. So I agree with everything you said. But as far as if you ask me how he did, look at our 2020 report, and I would say his leadership was instrumental on all those things that were accomplished this year. So I don't think that we can be implementing a system at the end of a year to say, oh, now here's your new targets. That's not fair.
Thank you, Council. Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So at the end of the motion, you'll read, so once approved, the policy will be implemented for use within the 21-22 evaluation period. However, the performance of the CAO during the 21-22 evaluation period prior to approval and implementation of the policy will be evaluated with reference to the performance objectives and job requirements in place prior to the approval and implementation of the policy. So
that all got added within the last couple of days because I don't have that in front of me. I'm sorry. What I'm looking at.
All right, let's go back to Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Wink, I understand. My original motion was as you're defining it, but that motion was revised in our e-scribe today. And that's why the motion I read was different than what you're seeing. If you didn't go in and renew your e-scribe for the meeting tonight, if your minutes are old e-scribe minutes, e-scribe only updated them sometime today. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so just to be clear then, Councillor, so this motion, or let's put it this way, the CAO will be evaluated for the past year on what we did a year previous, and what you're bringing forward will be for future years of evaluation. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's how the motion is in the present minutes in the e-scribe.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wink, you're
I'm fine with that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions on the motion? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Over the past year and a half, or probably close to 2 years now since Mr. Cribbs has been the CAO, he has identified a huge number of areas where the town didn't have a policy in place. And I can attest to that from all the additions that have been made to our policy binders. And I think this is a very important policy to have in place, not just for our term of council, but to have this in place down the road, no matter who's in council and no matter who the CAO is. You need to have, the guidance and the measures in place to be able to measure where you're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. And I would just like to also add that I had the same reluctance as Councillor Wink. And then when I did see the change at the end, you couldn't help but be for the motion. And again, I think it's a great idea. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mayor, and this is more of a comment. It's important to know where the goalposts are, but also too, it's deemed so important to have an annual performance review for a CAO in the province of Alberta that it's legislated. So just to put that into perspective, and yet we didn't even have a policy. So that's just something to think about. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments on this motion? Not seeing any. I will turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The vote for this would begin with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, and I have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be ready first, second, and third time and passed, being a bylaw number 4359/2021, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 21st day of June 2021, and to repeal policy S201-02 accessibility policy to be replaced with S113 accommodation policy. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. Any comments or questions on this item? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The vote will begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that does carry. Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular scheduled meeting for July 26, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. Mr. Mayor, for discussion?
I don't believe there is any. Just go ahead and call the vote, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will begin with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry, and you can gavel out your meeting.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mayor.
Night.
Night, staff.
Good night.
We will